Alright, I'm doing a video on this episode of Doctor Who Demons of the Punjab, and you can't stop me. I've seen people claim that this is a decent episode, and I've seen others claim it's a rather poor episode. Typically, they will discuss the story, the characters, the pacing, the production value, the actor's performance, even the music, but I'm not here to talk about any of that, I'm here to talk about the history. Because, to be frank, this episode makes absolutely no sense from a historical standpoint. Firstly, the timeline just doesn't match up. The partition of India happened in 1947, and this episode aired in 2018. We'll ignore the fact that the actress who played young Umbreen was 21 at the time of filming, and assume Umbreen was 18 when she got married. That would make her 89 by 2018. Now, I wasn't able to find a date of birth for old Umbreen, but we do know that she left India when she was 14 and was 17 in the early 60s. This means the earliest she could have been born is 1943, which would make her at most 4 years old when the partition happened. The oldest she could be in 2018 would then be 75. For context, here's Maggie Smith at 75, and here she is at 89. The gap isn't quite large enough for Umbreen's age to be off by an entire generation, but this is a big discrepancy. Secondly, the radio. The goddamn radio. For those of you who are unaware, having a radio in the British Raj was very much a luxury for the upper class. Also, pre-partition India as a colonial state was known as the British Raj. Anyway, it's also worth noting India had a lot of poverty, especially in rural areas. So, for the younger brother to have a radio at all is rather strange for the period. I'm also going to mention the British Raj's electrical grid would most certainly not extend to the countryside, so it's rather unclear how this radio is powered at all. Thirdly, is Prem on drugs? Genuine question. I feel like he might be. He says now we're being told our differences are more important than what unites us. A few questions. Who's telling you this? Who's telling you this and why? I know the voices on the radio are telling you this, but who are those voices? And for those of you who aren't aware, Prem also says, we've lived here for decades, Hindu, Muslim and Sikh, and that's technically true, but that doesn't mean that everyone got along. In fact, there's about 400 odd years of local and national history directly relevant to the cultural tension and attitudes which led to the partition. If we take Prem at his word, it sounds like people are just being angsty for absolutely no reason because some voices on the radio just started saying some hateful things for, again, no real reason. Remember that joke in Yu-Gi-Oh! The Abridged series?
And oh look, a shiny box! I must worship it!
Sorry, baby, but I'm a rebel. A loner, if you will, and I can't...
Kill your family! Kill your family! Kill your family! Marek, are you alright? Must kill family.
What's the matter, kid? You never seen the Kill Your Family show before?
Marek, we have to go. But I like that show.
What a sweet kid.
It's like that, but a professional writer unironically wrote it. Fourthly, and very closely related to my third point, is Umbreen also incredibly high? This is the point where I break down a little bit, but not before some historical context. The cultural tension had existed for quite some time, but the most recent and relevant source of this tension by 1949 would be the restructuring of India's political landscape. Bear with me. Hindus and Muslims were put on separate electoral registers and voted for separate Hindu and Muslim politicians. Seats were awarded to each side based on population distribution within the region. This had a few effects. Firstly, if your voters are strictly Hindus, then you're going to focus on issues which are pertinent to Hindus, and vice versa for Muslims. Not exactly a system which encourages unity. The natural extension of these parties is to blame others for mistakes, whether they are responsible for them or not. There's a plethora of examples in modern America where this strategy is rather apparent, especially when Republicans are discussing who's responsible for the national debt. This brings us to our second point, tying the political system to religion as a very quick way to create a culture war. Imagine if American Democrats were just as religious as American Republicans, but followed a different religion. You can understand now why Muslims and Hindus not only disliked each other, but had genuine concerns for their well-being under the rule of the other side. Now, for the British Raj, this was ideal. Whenever disputes arose, and they most certainly did arise, the Brits could play the role of the neutral arbitrator. For India, this created a rather awkward reliance on colonialism, so this is why the subcontinent was plunged into a chaotic, violent mass migration when the Brits left. This is also why it makes no sense that Prem is under the impression that these people have been whipped up into a frenzy, as these sentiments had been festering for quite some time. Now, you'll note the start of this fourth point was actually regarding Umbreen, but Prem is also equally guilty of this. They don't seem to be the slightest bit worried, at least not in the same regard you'd expect. It's apparent that neither family approve of this marriage, but the reality is they're going to be ostracised from society, not just their families. You have to remember, this is 1947 India. Poverty to the point of destitution was not uncommon even for entire villages. Food was a serious problem, so much so that military rations were a major reason as to why the British Raj had the largest standing volunteer army. Neither of them seemed particularly concerned for their livelihood, or even the reality that starvation is a very likely possibility given the historical setting. Neither of them seem to show any real understanding of the ramifications of what they're about to do, or the implications thereafter. Fifthly, what is this place again? Why are these two able to run away to what is essentially a villa with no one else nearby? This is just such a weird place to exist, and apparently it's isolated enough where they can run away from both of their families and not be found, but not so isolated they'd be without food or clean water or, adequate shelter, or even pack animals. It's such and also the facilities you'd need to keep pack animals. It's such a bizarre place to exist that just the base setting does not make any sense whatsoever. Overall, this episode demonstrates the writing team's exhaustive research ended after the first paragraph in the Wikipedia article for the partition of India. Not only are the sentiments of the time misrepresented, but the characters who misrepresent them are chronologically not old enough to partake in any of the events that transpire. Now, let me be completely transparent. I am not an expert on these events, not by a long shot. A lot of my knowledge from India comes from Empire Total War, Europa Universalis 4, Hearts of Iron 4, Age of Empires 3, and even Street Fighter. I've seen the odd film here and there, notably Mother India and Sholay, both great films. I would say I have a passing interest. What I've presented is most definitely an oversimplification, and I'm more than happy to concede that I've probably gotten quite a few things wrong. But my main point is this period has a lot of things going on. There's plenty of depth, there's plenty of stories, of lessons, and of poignant messages to showcase. If you're going to do an episode on a pain point in human history, something that has resulted in fierce cultural division which continues to be a pain point even today, then you ought to do it justice. And if you can't do that, then at the very least, you should at least get the basics right. I still don't know how to wrap up videos, but hopefully this has been mildly informative and even potentially enjoyable. Upcoming on my channel, I'll be debunking cinema wins at some point eventually, and potentially doing something else with Trek culture. I'm not sure yet, but at some point I need to return back to Star Trek, he says after doing one singular video that's not on topic for Star Trek. Anyway, this has been me in a room in front of a microphone